Hello. So, I'm back to continue Seduce Me to the Demon War with James's route. So yeah, owie. So, continue. Hi, how are you? So here we go. This was completely crazy. I was stuck in a demon world with the man I loved, and I had to wait until the war was over to even consider going home. I held James's hand tightly as we walked through the halls of the castle, now worried and remembering my nightmare once again. I began to feel nervous, nauseous even. There there were so many there were so many things wrong about this, and there were even wow, I can't read. Even more things that could go wrong with this plan. Kill the demon lord. It's kill the demon lord. It sounded so simple, but this war had been going on for a while. Who knew truly if this was going to be the final battle? Fair point. James most likely felt the nervousness in my hand as he gave it a gentle squeeze, catching my attention and breaking my thoughts.
Are you okay?
Alright, hang on.
Are you okay?
And let me know how the volume is for their voices. Hang on a second. There we go. I couldn't lie to him. I was worried about this whole ordeal. Add on the add on the fact that we were in the demon world where James came from, and my worries increased tenfold. James gently squeezed my hand, leaning over to kiss my head gently.
Everything will be alright. We'll get back home soon enough.
I know, but James looked to me, staring at me with worry of his own.
Are you worried about your nightmare?
I nodded. The nightmare. Okay, that's good. I nodded. The nightmare had mildly plagued me, reminding me of what things James could potentially do. I knew it wasn't the truth, but a part of me became fearful of it honestly being the case. James furrowed his eyebrows slightly before releasing my hand and wrapping it beneath his arm, walking with me like a gentleman. Aw.
Whatever happens, I promise that no one will hurt you.
Aw, James. I squeezed James's arm, believing him at least for now. It was comforting to know that he was going to protect me and help me through this. We continued down the hall led by our guards toward our room. The others were given rooms apparently on the opposite end of the castle, while James and I claimed the ambassador's room I had stayed in the night before. At least it was a room I was familiar with. I began to space out, imagining what was going to happen. What we would kill the demon lord, break the curse on me, and go home to be married. That was the plan, but what if we couldn't kill him? What if he was more powerful than we thought? James, however, gently nudged me, catching my attention and breaking me from my thoughts.
Did you know that time works differently between the human and demon worlds?
Huh? I can tell that he was trying to calm me down with something else to keep my mind on. I became curious as to what he meant. Time works differently here?
Indeed. In this world, time moves slower. What would take a day to grow in the human world would take 5 days here.
Interesting. I was astonished. Time was that different? I began to wonder how long I had been gone from the human world if that was the case. As if James read my mind, he smiled at me.
You were gone for about 5 hours before we found you.
Ah, 5 hours? I had been in a demon world for an entire day, but back home I hadn't been gone that long. It made no sense at all, but James continued to speak as I stared in shock.
When you didn't arrive at the hall, we sent everyone home and used our powers to make sure no one would be suspicious. Once everyone left, we tracked you down and came here to find you.
I nodded in reply, taking in the explanation. It was crazy to think about, but I guess it made sense. My mind wanted to fight it, but I had to remember this was a new world filled with its own rules, so human logic didn't necessarily apply here. We finally arrived in our room, and were left alone for the night. I sat down on the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the day take over as James examined the room carefully. He walked around the room, observing each bit of decor with curious care.
So this is Lilith Castle.
I raised an eyebrow. This place had a name? Lilith Castle? James nodded, walking over to the tapestry on the wall and examining it as he explained.
This castle was the home of the first succubus, Lilith. Demons of Lilith, like myself and my brothers, come from one of thousands of branches of her bloodline. But we're not pure-blooded incubi. Diana, however, is a pure-blooded succubus, directly descended from Lilith herself.
My dream flashed before my eyes, reminding me of Diana's words towards James. I nodded in understanding as he continued with a small smile.
That's why her family was able to convince the demon lord to make her my betrothed. They were extremely powerful and could easily charm others, being of pure Lilith blood.
I could only imagine it, remembering how Diana controlled an entire school like it was easy for her to send a small shiver down my spine. If she was that powerful, then how powerful was she now after so long? James chuckled a bit, breaking my thoughts.
Of course, you know what happened after that.
James finally walked over and sat beside me, softly wrapping an arm around my waist and bringing me close to him. I nuzzled his shoulder, enjoying the warmth of his body. I remembered clearly what happened. James chose me after all, and I chose him. We loved each other and defied Diana's attempts to take him away because of it. I couldn't have been more proud of myself at that moment in time. James leaned down a bit and whispered in my ear, making me shiver slightly in his arms.
Besides, the woman I'm engaged to now is more amazing than any princess in all of the 5 worlds.
Aww. I blushed at his words, feeling my heart skip a beat. James really did love me. Aww. He was so sweet and caring. I felt blessed being able to be with him, both as his fiance and physically in the same world. Though my worries began to slowly break apart and melt in my chest as I looked up at him and leaned in, capturing his lips with my own. James seemed surprised for a moment before he let a soft groan escape his lips and kissed me back. He gently pressed a hand on the back of my head, keeping me close as we kissed each other lovingly. It was almost orgasmic the way his lips moved against mine. As we slowly pulled away from each other, letting our breaths intermingle in the space between us, James smiled. I became lost in his whiskey brown eyes, wanting so much to forever be entranced by them.
Come, let's get some sleep. We have a lot to do tomorrow.
All right. I nodded and both of us settled into the bed, drifting to sleep. As our heads hit the pillows, I felt at peace knowing that James was by my side. But my peace didn't last. What? What the? I felt the void around me shift and brighten to the blinding white, causing me to shut my eyes. Feathers gently brushed against my skin, and I lurched and squirmed away from them instinctively. What was happening to me? What the hell is happening? Diana's voice echoed through the air, surprising me and causing me to look around. As I turned my head to look behind me, a pair of arms wrapped themselves around me and held me close. What?
Don't struggle.
Seto? Seto?
Et hic habet potestatum, adoro teut non exidurum.
I'm confused.
E credere de loco isto.
I became lost in what was happening. Nothing was making sense, but I knew that they were speaking in some form of Latin. The voices that weren't Diana and Seto, however, stuck fear into my core with each word they spoke.
Seto, end this!
On Diana's command, Seto cast some sort of spell, causing his body and mind to become enveloped in gold light. I felt every nerve in my body heat up almost uncomfortably, making me squirm slightly in Seto's arm. Seto, however, tightened his hold on me and continued casting the spell. At last, the world around me suddenly went dark, and I found myself shooting up in bed awake. Gah!
Love?
Weird dream. What the hell was that, dude? I looked to my side to see James shaken awake by my sudden outburst. His eyes were glossed over from exhaustion, but he continued to watch me with worry. This was the second time I woke him up like this. Damn it!
Why are angels hunting you?
What? James and I suddenly shot our heads towards the sound of Diana's voice. Seeing her settle by the door, she had her arms crossed, and a look of pure irritation on her face as she awaited my answer. However, I didn't know what to say. Angels were hunting me? I stared at Diana, confused as to what she meant. James sat up at last, matching her expression with irritation of his own.
What are you talking about?
I wasn't speaking to you, James.
My eyes widened at the slip. Did she almost say James's real name? Diana growled and clicked her teeth before looking to me again, glaring harder.
Your dream almost allowed them to erase your memories.
What the hell? My body chilled at the thought. What the hell? I was confused and fearful of what was going on. What was happening? Why were angels after me? James wrapped his arms around me, seeing me visibly shaken at Diana's words.
Explain, Diana.
Ask your fiancée why she's targeted by them. Don't ask me. I want to know as well.
I don't freaking know either. I truly didn't know what could I say. This was the first time I had heard of angels hunting me. The dream was not a dream I had ever experienced before.
Angels don't target just anyone. They have to have a reason for hunting people down to erase their memories.
Especially when their target is in the demon world.
I'm so confused. Okay, hang on a second. What the hell? Hang on. Ninja, did you really just invite me to play a game with you? I'm currently streaming a game. Hello? Okay. Alright. I held my head and shook it, trying to figure it out. Did I do something wrong? What did I do to incur the wrath of angels? Diana sighed and rubbed her temples. Oh, shit.
Well, they've been expelled from the castle for now. For how long? Who knows? However, we need to figure out why they are trying to take your memories away.
Looking up at last at Diana, I can tell that this was a serious situation. Seto looked at the floor, exhausted from casting a spell to expel. Oh my god, I can't pronounce. Expel them. It's himself. Diana growled beneath her teeth as she looked to the wall.
Another problem. Great. Can this war be any more irritating?
I found myself curled into myself a bit at Diana's irritation. I was already a problem that she was going to help solve, and now there was a second problem on the top of that. James hugged me gently against his chest, comfortably feeling me shirk. I don't know if I said that right. Back away from Diana.
Is that all?
From the tone of James's voice, he wanted Diana to leave immediately. Diana looked over and stared at James, a flash of slight fear in her eyes before her face hardened to a cold glare.
No. Whatever you are doing to try and make me fear you needs to stop.
I don't know what you are talking about.
Huh?
Say what you will, but I can recognize fear enthrallment anywhere. Thank your father for that.
I looked at James, seeing him glare hard at Diana, while Diana simply glared back. When my eyes trailed to Seto, I could see a form of jealousy burn in his gaze at my fiancé. What was happening? James?
Yes, love?
Diana, you shush. Diana turned on her heel towards Seto, now furious for some reason. Seto, seeing his mistress turn, quickly turned as well and opened the door for her.
Sleep. We have work to do tomorrow.
Diana left with Seto right behind her, closing the door. James's embrace finally relaxed around me and pulling me close. What was that about?
I don't know.
Truly? James nodded as I turned in his arms to fully observe him. James's face seemed very genuine. Still, something was off, and I knew it. Something was off, and I knew it. It had happened when James arrived, and apparently only occurred when Diana was around. It was some sort of power struggle between James and Diana, and he was winning, at least from what I can tell. I shook my head. If James didn't know what was happening, then maybe it was just my imagination? James, however, stared at me with pure concern written all over his expression.
But was Diana right? Are angels after you?
I don't freaking know. I don't know. I just had the dream I don't know. I just had a dream that was full of light and feathers, and a look of fear ran across James's face for a moment before he shook his head and returned to his calculated but worried expression. Was Diana correct? Was it an angel attack and not just some random dream? My memories recalled when I was captured, the voices that appeared in my room before the imps sounded so similar to the ones in my dream. Had they been angels as well? This is crazy. What was going on? First I'm cursed and I'm hunted? This was unbelievable in every sense of the word. Nothing made sense, and this entire situation was confusing. What would angels want with me? James shook his head and kissed my forehead.
Well, they're gone now. Let's get some more sleep.
I nodded, wrapping my arms around James and lying back with him. He slowly began to pet my hair, most likely waiting for me to sleep first before he did. Slowly, I closed my eyes and let the darkness of sleep take over me once again. This time, there were no rocky dreams. I simply floated up in the darkness until I naturally woke up, still in James's arms. I looked up at James's sleeping face, so peaceful and almost happy. His arms around my form made me feel warm and fuzzy inside, causing me to cuddle closer to his body. Unconsciously, James pulled me closer to him, wrapping his arms tighter around me. I could tell he was awake, however. His breathing wasn't slow like it usually was when he slept. James? No response. He was pretending. You dork. Which made me giggle a bit. Little things like this took my mind off of the world and made me forget my troubles. Whatever they were, I guess that was the blessing of being in love. I smiled and kissed James's cheek, making his smile grow a bit more. I knew it. I know you're awake.
No, you don't.
If you weren't awake, you wouldn't be responding. I laughed and playfully smacked his upper arm, making him laugh as well and open his eyes to look at me with a loving but tired gaze. I became once again lost in his eyes as he smiled at me.
Good morning. Did you sleep better?
I nodded, knowing he would be happy to hear it. I was more than happy to say it before snuggling into his arms, nuzzling into his chest. What about you? Did you sleep well? James nodded and ran his hand, oh God, I can't read. Ran his hand through my hair, petting me lovingly.
I did. All I did was dream of you.
Aww. A soft blush formed on my eyes. Why can't I read? A soft blush formed on my cheeks before I looked up at him, seeing him smile down at me.
It's the truth. Would you like to hear?
I felt myself nod before I even tried to think about the question. James smirked a bit before wrapping his arms fully around me and leaning in to whisper in my ear.
I dreamt that we were on a private island, basking in the sand beneath the sun. The wind was perfect, and you looked absolutely stunning in your swimsuit.
Aww. I began to imagine it myself, causing the blush on my face to intensify as James tightened his hug around me. My body began to heat up on its own from the warmth his body gave me.
Then you pulled me into a kiss, one that I couldn't help but melt into. You kept teasing me until I pinned you down against the sand, and I made you beg for me to kiss you.
James peppered kisses along my cheek, making my body shiver at both the image of his dream and the feeling of his lips upon my skin. I let out a silent but shaky sigh as James nuzzled my head, opening his mouth to say more. At last our moment was broken by a loud knock on our door.
Oi! Quit fucking in there! You got food for— Go! Little shit!
Oh, dear God, Sam.
Oh, I don't want to imagine that, dude!
We do have food, though. May we come in?
Oh, God, I love Sam. James and I let out a simultaneous sigh, so much for enjoying the moment. This was the misfortune of not being alone. I knew that we would eventually have our alone time together, but for now a blush of embarrassment ran across my cheeks in response to Sam's allegation. James smiled and kissed my forehead before lifting his head and sitting up.
Come on in, we just got up.
I sat up as well right as the door opened the hallway, revealing James's brothers and their wives with bleh. With plates of food, Eric and Irene each carried 2 plates and handed the extras to me and James.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Irene.
My pleasure.
On the plate was food I recognized: bread, cheese, fruit, and some sort of jerky. I assumed it was safe and something I could... Okay. James placed his plate on his lap before looking to the group.
So, training starts today.
Finally! I get to kick some ass.
You kick ass anyway, you dork.
Ah. Sam blushed and rubbed his neck before stuffing his face with food, not wanting to say any more. Matthew laughed and nodded.
We know what you mean, dude. We can finally kick that old man's ass.
Not to be the skeptical brother here, but is it possible to become stronger than him in just a week? It's been a while since we've had any encounter involving combat, after all.
Fair.
We'll kill him.
Everyone looked to Damien. Seeing his stern and cold expression, I frowned, knowing why Damien was so angered at the Demon Lord. As the bastard son, Damien had been left for dead and only survived thanks to his brothers. Damien had more reason than most to hold a grudge against the Demon Lord. I can see that. James, however, cleared his throat and looked to Eric.
We won't be fighting him alone. This rebellion will help us and allow us to focus our energy on defeating him.
I've been waiting years to kick his arrogant brute face in.
I think we all have a grudge against him, Sam.
Right.
We got this.
I would not be so sure.
Everyone turned to see Seto in the doorway alone, leaning against the archway with his arms crossed.
Oh, Sarah, where is...
My mistress had a rough night. She's still recovering from it.
I grimaced, knowing that the reason she had a rough night was because of me. Seto, however, seemed to be re-energized and somewhat bright-eyed. His gaze landed on James and glared hard, causing my fancy to straighten up a bit.
None of you know what has happened these past 10 years. None of you know of the Demon Lord's true strength.
Then would you care to enlighten us?
At last, Seto pushed off of the doorway and walked further into the room, closing the door behind them. He looked to each brother, examining each man before settling his gaze on James again.
The Demon Lord is a madman.
You don't need to tell us that.
Right.
No. He was mad before, but he lost his mind completely when my mistress formed the rebellion against him. He's killed thousands by his own hand alone out of pure rage.
Seto's grip on his spear tightened. Something resurfaced in his thoughts, reflected in his glare.
Too many times has my lady faced off against him and almost lost her life in exchange.
Yikes. Seto's cold stare rehardened itself on his face, and he shook away the thought and looked to Damien, who had a stony expression to match.
What makes you think that you, a band of humanized demons, have any chance of destroying him on your own?
Sorry. The brothers seemed to glare in unison at Seto, as did the wives. I, however, saw his point. The boys had been in the human world for over 2 years. They had missed so much here and had grown accustomed to human life. I had only been here a day and knew that this world was much more ruthless than the human world. Sam stood and marched towards Siddle, standing almost nose to nose with the guard and giving him a terrifying glare.
What makes you think we can't, prick?
Wow.
I have seen with my own eyes what the Demon Lord can do in battle.
We had to live with that sack of shit for almost 100 years as his sons. We know more than you ever will.
Sam, that's enough.
No, it's not.
Sam and Siddle continued to glare daggers into each other's souls, anger burning in their eyes without any sign of retreat.
We had to live with the fact that our dad burnt down villages, enslaved people, and stole hundreds of lives day after day, ending his night fucking a woman who was chained to a goddamn bed. What the fuck makes you think that we don't know anything about him?
Yikes. Damien seemed to flinch at Sam's words, but his angered face remained as Siddle and Sam had their stare down. Siddle, however, remained unfazed.
Like I said, he has completely lost his mind. If he was a monster before, he is Satan himself now. He does more than slaughter and burn villages. He takes prisoners and paints the ground with their blood while howling into the sky. He leads legions of imp demons who do nothing but make sure their victims suffer in agony before making them beg for death. He now takes pleasure not in a bed, but in the screams of millions.
In an act of defiance, Siddle straightened his back and almost towered over Sam, gritted his teeth.
If anything, the reason he's as mad as he is now is because you all decided to run, so the blame for this war rests on all your shoulders.
Holy! Instantly, Sam's fist met Siddle's jaw and forced him back towards the door. Siddle slammed to the door and gripped his hand over his mouth, rubbing in pain.
Sam!
Sam!
Fuck you! Do not blame this fucking war on us!
Sam? Siddle wiped his lips of fresh blood that began dripping from his mouth and glared as if the punch wasn't as painful as it looked.
Arrogant mutt! The call of the human world was too tempting for you to ignore. You have forgotten about duty and responsibility.
We left because we were tired of the lives we had.
You left the world and everyone in it to become the victim of a madman and a world war. None of you understand what we have even sacrificed to stay alive.
No, we don't. And we never will.
James finally stood from the bed and placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, forcing him to step back as Sam rejoined Carrie, who wrapped her arms around him in comfort. James looked at Sarah.
But you cannot blame us for wanting to be free.
Right. Siddle, on the other hand, began to laugh. It was a painful laugh, but one full of anger.
You have no right to defend yourself, eldest son. Because of you specifically, my mistress's entire world was destroyed.
I stared wide-eyed at Siddle. This was about their betrothal. I don't know if I pronounced that right. But James did what was best for him. He and I didn't care about the consequences of our love, but Siddle's painful words made me shake. Siddle's eyes began to bounce once again in jealousy at James and rage at his words.
Because of you, the only people she had in this world, her family, was brutally murdered in the most sadistic of ways.
Right.
The imps painted the walls of the castle nursery in the king and queen's blood, while her unborn baby sister was ripped from the queen's womb and nailed to the wall like a hunting trophy.
Oh, God. Oh. Dear God. I felt sick to my stomach just imagining it. I'm feeling that right now. Good God. Despite not wanting to in the first place, the imagery was too much. But Siddle continued without mercy.
Asair had to watch her kingdom burn before her eyes and listen to the screams of her people when she returned from the human world after hunting you all down. It was only after the siege when she saw the fate of her own family.
Siddle finally straightened up. At the sight, he looked powerful and strong, but his eyes burned with anger and rage as he glared at James. For the first time in my life, I saw fear run through James's eyes.
Yet you all claim innocence.
You all know nothing of innocence! Enough, settle!
Hi, Diana. Everyone shot their heads towards Diana's voice to see her standing in the corner of the room, shrouded by shadow. However, I could faintly see tears running down Diana's cheek despite the terrifying anger on her face towards Seto.
You will not speak of the past again, Zero. Understood?
Yes, my lady.
Diana finally stepped away from the corner and stood in front of Seto and across from James, uncaring towards the rope, tears running down her face.
What's done is done. We can't ever change the past, no matter how desperately we try. What matters now is preparing for the Demon Lord and the final battle.
James nodded. It was a sour note to end on, but Diana's words were the truth. We couldn't linger on pointing fingers and having doubts now. Diana ran a hand through her hair and looked around the room, pressing her lips into a fine line.
So, about all of you participating in the war, you all obviously need to train.
Everyone nodded in agreement to Diana's statement. While we weren't battle ready, we still needed to at least know how to defend ourselves. Diana, however, looked to me.
You, most of all.
Huh? Me? I was suddenly confused. How come I was the odd one out that had to be ready the most? The last thing I remembered about me training was that Diana was against the idea altogether. Diana sighed and rubbed her temple.
Apparently, there are guidelines to breaking this curse. Not only do we have to kill the Demon Lord, but you have to be nearby when it happens for the curse to even break.
That makes no sense. Where did you learn this?
Shadow. He spent the night trying to find alternative ways to break your curse. Unfortunately, we didn't find anything of the sort, but we found the guidelines to breaking it.
Okay. Well, it makes no sense. Still makes no sense.
Even while it doesn't, it's still better to be safe than sorry. I don't want to kill him and then still have you stuck here because of an error.
Fair. I could only sigh and take it in, so I had to be there when the Demon Lord fell. Great. Diana waved her hand dismissively through the air, breaking my potential thoughts.
Anyway, we can't have you dying on the way there, and we can't monitor you when we're in battle. You should at least know how to defend yourself. That's why we've come up with a solution.
Huh? What solution?
Right.
Simple. The other rebel leaders and Sero have agreed that if you'd like a trainer to enhance your abilities, you can train with one of them.
Alright. I stared, seeing Seto step forward with a nod.
Each of the leaders is proficient in a different area of magic and battle strategy, good enough for self-defense. I can't speak for the others, but I can assure you that with Sero's skill and training methods, you will be well prepared by the time the siege arrives.
Okay. Seto nodded and bowed to me slightly. While I was flattered at the idea, did I really need a trainer? I knew Taekwondo and I at least knew how to defend myself, demon or not. Then again, we were in a demon world where magic was the norm. Diana ran a hand through her hair, looking to the side as she lifted off each leader and their skills.
Sergeant is a brute demon, bred from a nomadic tribe. He most likely teach you the ways of the brute demon, using your fists and speed to keep you alive. Shadow is, by definition, a shadow demon, so he'd probably teach you about dark magic, light manipulation, and assassination. Rabbit is a wild magic-based animal demon, using her animal-focused energy as her weapon. She'd probably teach you how to do the same. Fae? I am honestly not sure. I know they can change their size and use elemental magic as well, but to be honest, I do not know what they would teach you.
I choose Shadow. Diana nodded. Shadow seemed very intelligent and knew the ins and outs of being sneaky and dodgy. It would definitely help in battle not to get hit and maybe take blah 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 enemies by surprise. With that, Diana turned on her heel and left the room.
Finish eating. Afterwards, you should start training.
Everyone in the room nodded their affirmation as Diana and Seda left.
Well, it looks like we'll be busy for the next couple of days.
This'll be fun.
Man, training's gonna suck.
It'll be worth it, though.
Right.
Damien's right.
As we all finished eating, everyone left to either train or do things on their own. I left to start my own work, determined to be prepared for what was to come. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I wouldn't let him. Choosing Shadow defied almost every part of my moral compass. He seemed like a fantastical sociopath, lacking a care for anyone but the war and himself. Still, I had to admit his personality made me curious about his abilities. After all, he was the one that almost sent me back home through Diana's shadow. At the memory of the void filled my thought, I began to try and dissect how it was done. Were shadows doorways here? Was Shadow just that powerful? How exactly was he able to a person shadowed into a void through the world? Maybe that was the reason why I chose him as my trainer. My curiosity about his abilities were pecking at me and I needed answers. Learning some of those abilities myself was just the icing on the cake. I was guided to the library by a scout, most likely under orders, and found Shadow reading through scrolls on the table near the fireplace. Upon me entering, Shadow looked over.
Ah, there you are. Come, sit.
Shadow motioned a hand towards one of the seats almost dismissively as he continued to pore over what he was reading. I followed his directions and sat down in the chair watching him. For a full minute he said nothing. I watched as he read each line off of the scrolls before him and occasionally switched scrolls to read what the others had written down on them. The handwriting was in hastily scribbled Latin, so there was no way for me to understand it. However, I began to feel a little agitated. Weren't we supposed to be training? I decided to simply stand up, hopefully to catch his attention. However, as I attempted to, I felt myself unable to push off against the chair, like I was stuck to the seat. Huh? I looked down at the chair I was in. It was a simple chair. How was I stuck? I wiggled a bit in my seat. Nothing that I wasn't sitting on wasn't sticking, nor was anything keeping me down physically. What the hell? I attempted to stand once more, unable to move any further than a centimeter up from the seat before needing to sit back down.
Do you understand now, human?
What? I looked up at Shadow, seeing him continue to visually ignore me, but noticed a small smirk on his lips. How is he holding me down somehow?
When you can stand, we will begin.
My eyes widened. This was a test. This was an unfair trap of a test that I fell into, and now I had to find my way out. I had to figure out how he was trapping me to the chair and stand. This was going to be an adventure and a half. I looked down and around my body on the seat, seeing my shadow beneath me. It was pretty obvious that he was using my shadow to hold me down. But the question was, how was I going to break its hold? I took a moment and let my thoughts dissect the problem. He was holding me by a shadow. He had to have been. It only made sense. If I somehow made my shadow disappear, then his hold would vanish along with it. However, how was I going to do that? My shadow was beneath me, formed by the shape of my body and the firelight. Then it hit me. A firelight. I looked at the fireplace, seeing it burn bright from the, I can't pronounce that word, with within its mouth. It illuminated the room and gave every person and object a shadow. I stared into it. My plan became set. I smirked and gripped the armrest and planted my feet on the floor. I pulled the chair up onto one of its legs, pushing off the ground with my foot, and completely turning the chair around facing away from it. My entire body became covered in shadow, but I knew my plan had worked. I no longer felt a hold on me, keeping me in the chair. My shadow vanished into the new darkness around me. I quickly pushed off of the chair, finally being able to stand. It seemed so freeing to be able to stand again, having me trapped in that chair. As I felt my body standing upright, Shadow let out an impressed
Quicker than I anticipated.
Oh yeah? I glared. Did he honestly think that little of me? I had to stare at Shadow like he had 5 heads. As he turned to me, he smirked at my facial expression, causing me to fight back the urge to snap at him.
I had to see how intelligent you were. I'm not going to waste time on someone who doesn't know how to use their brain.
Despite the insult, I could feel that he was underhandedly complimenting me in some twisted way. I guess what I was able to pull out of his statement was that I was smart enough to fend for myself. I could tell that this was going to be both an annoying process, but at least an interesting one. Shadow shook his head and stepped away from the table and towards me. He gripped the chair I was on and turned it back around to face the fireplace before crossing his arms.
What I will be teaching you are mere basics of dark magic. You will be able to hide in plain sight, control your environment, and even defend against impossible odds. I expect you to use these abilities wisely. Understood?
I suddenly became excited that I would be able to do all of those things. The idea of it all became rather fascinating and outright too good to be true. However, I was in the demon world. Anything was possible. I nodded and mentally prepared for whatever he threw my way. I wouldn't fall for that trap. Shadow took a breath and let out a silent sigh before closing his eyes. His body slowly became pitch black, covered by a wave of shadow. Despite the firelight on his body, his form slowly melted down to the ground and faded into the shadow of the table beside him. What? I became confused, but as I stood for a moment, there was only silence as I replied. Was this what he meant by using my brain? I had to copy it. How did he even do that? How was I going to even start trying? You're not going to tell me how to do that, are you? I was once again greeted with silence, making me let out a sigh. I had to figure it out. I replayed the spell in my head from memory, trying to discern how he made himself into a shadow. Maybe I had to think about becoming a shadow. Did that even make any sense? Did that even make any sense? I closed my eyes and tried to imagine darkness covering me. As stupid as it sounded, it was worth a shot. However, as I did, something in my nerves seemed to make me hesitate. I could sense a feeling of cold dread try and take over my body. As I thought about the darkness, was this something I was supposed to feel? I felt suddenly scared and started to second guess my desire to learn about dark magic.
Why are you hesitating?
I heard Shadow's voice rumble through the air, causing me to question the training. Did I want to go through with this? Yes. I shook my head. I needed to be brave about this. It was a new set of skills I could use in battle. I just had to take it slow. I closed my eyes again and took a deep breath and focused on becoming a shadow. A cold feeling ran through my body, crawling over my skin and completely enveloping me in its embrace. Soon my entire body had become surrounded in frozen numbness. As I opened my eyes, I gasped at the sight. Shadow was once again in front of me, but the room around us had become visually dark and misty, like I was in another world. My body felt light as I stepped towards my trainer in confusion. Shadow lifted an arm and gestured dismissively around us towards the environment.
Welcome to the Shadow Plane.
The Shadow Plane?
Indeed. Think of it as a copy of the real world, but no one lives here except shadows.
I furrowed my eyebrows, still confused, but gasped as I heard quiet footsteps rushing outside of the door. I was shocked to see demons in black hoods and cloaks running back and forth along the hall. What the hell?
Those are my scouts. They use this plane to travel without being hindered by other beings. They're much quicker this way.
I looked at... dang it. I looked at the ground, seeing it coated completely black in darkness. How was I able to be here if this was a new plane? I thought I was trapped in the demon world. How can I be here if I'm cursed?
This plane is part of the demon world, so the curse does not affect you coming here. We are currently shadows of the real world. Untouchable and barely traceable.
Okay. Hang on a second. Alright. I nodded, taking in what he was saying, so I was able to roam around now and not be seen. That was an interesting power. Shadow began to walk out of the room, ushering me to follow.
Come. You will see the benefit of this world in action.
I quickly followed, excited to see what we were going to do. Where would we go? What was he going to show me? Shadow and I walked quietly through the halls. I could faintly see the outlines of people who were not in the Shadow Plane and became shocked to see Shadow simply pass through them as if they weren't there. As a couple of people passed through me, I felt instinctively strange, but physically felt nothing. It was like I was a ghost. We truly were shadows. As we arrived at the war room, Shadow stopped me and peered inside. I crouched and looked through the door as well, hiding out of instinct. Inside were Diana and a person covered by a cloak. Diana's face painted the situation's emotions very clearly as one of agitation towards the girl who stood before her at attention.
Shama, I understand that he didn't accept it, but where did you take it?
I was told to throw it away.
Your master told you to throw it away?
As I said, ma'am.
Diana gazed at the hooded figure bearing her stare into her soul. However, Diana could only sigh. What was Diana asking about? What did the figure throw away?
Very well. You are dismissed.
The demon bowed and left the room, passing through me in shadow. It still felt weird that people were able to go through me, but I shook it out as Shadow cleared his throat.
Scare the succubus.
What? I looked up at Shadow, surprised at his demand. However, his cold gaze pierced back into mine, letting me know that he was serious about what he had asked me. I instantly became nervous and a little fearful. I had to scare Diana. How? The idea of appearing behind her came to mind, but Shadow seemed to know what I was thinking.
Scare her from this plane.
Now things became complicated. This was a space where I was just walking through people. How was I going to even face her in this world? I looked into the room, taking note of everything. The light of the room was pretty bright. Her shadow was cast against the wall, mimicking Diana's actual movements. Was I able to do anything with that? What about the light in the room? Was it possible to dim the lights like ghosts? It seemed a bit complicated, but it could be fun. I took a moment to think before deciding. It seemed like the most simple plan. I decided to go through with it. I quickly rushed and hugged the wall next to Diana's shadow. With a close view, but the shadow seemed almost as detailed as the real person. Every strand of hair had a pigment of darkness. It was kind of cool the more I stared, but I had a job to do. I focused on her head, noting the horns protruding from it. The shadow made it look like she had ears. Fairly cute. Maybe that could do something. I raised my hand and ran my fingers along the horns of her shadow, hoping to grasp it somehow. Suddenly, I shot my head to Diana as she released a moan. She bent over the table, gripping the horn. I caressed the via shadow with a slightly shaky hand. What the hell? Did I do that? Diana looked around to her face as red as a tomato. Were her horns a weakness? I grazed my fingers along her shadow against over her other horn out of curiosity. Diana gripped her other horn and bent over further, hiding her horns in her shadow. Damn. However, I became mildly excited I could touch her without touching her. This made no sense, but it was working. I could only guess that this was the power shadow demons. Diana stood up straight, taking in the breath before letting out a sigh.
Dear, I know you're there.
Hi, Diana. What the hell? How did she know? As shadows switched to the real world, I felt my body forced itself back as well, like I had run out of energy. I finally felt warmth consume my body, making me feel dizzy and lightheaded. What?
She's done quite well. She went into the shadow plane without much hesitation.
I see.
I naturally hugged the wall, feeling the after effects of the transfer dance over my body like ripping waves of wind. It felt so strange. I knew I still had a lot of energy, but I wasn't able to stay in the shadow plane for long.
I'm surprised she managed to stay there for as long as she did. I expected her to phase out before we came here.
To do what, exactly?
Shadow stared at Diana blankly before turning towards the door and walking out.
Come. We have more work to do, human.
The irritated look on Diana's face looked semi-hilarious, but I shook my head and ran out the shadow, pumped to learn more. How did I do all that?
Curious, are you?
Well, yeah, I am your student after all. I want to know. As we walked back to the library, Shadow looked to me and gave a slight smirk.
You are quite interesting for a human.
Oh, yeah? I felt a bit flattered and ran my hand through my neck, bearing a shy smile. I had to admit that I was acting like a little girl who had just learned about candy. Still, I had very good reason. I did something I never imagined I could do. It was well worth the excitement. Shadow shook his head and let out a sigh.
While it is impossible for us to touch anyone in the shadow plane, let alone assassinate them, it is very possible to distract them or affect the light sources of the world.
Like how I did?
Indeed. A shadow is more than just a reaction to light. It is also a part of a person's being, able to be used to, let's just say, get a message across.
So I can't kill anyone from the shadow plane?
No, but you can very easily make them feel as if they aren't alone, putting them on alert and giving you a good chance to kill them while they're distracted.
I took a moment to take in what he meant. I could see how manipulating the shadows were a great benefit in battle. However, apparently I had a time limit for how long I could be in the shadows. At least it wasn't entirely overpowered. Alright. I only wanted to play like an hour of this, just for the hell of it, to get more through James's route. I'm gonna actually end the stream here. Save it. I just wanted to play like an hour of this, because why not? So, let's see who I can raid, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Alright. Alright, here we go. Let's go raid Night Revenge. And I will see you guys in my next stream, either sometime this weekend or on either Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. But yeah. Alright. I'm gonna raid night and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!